Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are here with Austin from Ohio, and today is Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. I am very appreciative of every single one of you who have been checking in on me and talking to me through this little stump, I guess you could say, like a little, you know, it feels like I hit a brick wall with the whole just everything going on in the world, and that itself is not affecting me as much as reading the people's response and their beliefs toward things that are going on in the world. For instance, I'm reading about this whole, Russia-Ukraine thing. Whatever you think about it, it's really doesn't matter at this point in time of where we are in this new world order. People have the complete wrong idea. They think that nation states still act upon their own free will as an autonomous nation, which has been untrue for the longest time. And you should see how they respond to each other. They are taking part in the Hegelian dialectic. They have fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And this is just that on a mass scale. And just reading into all this and listening to people talk out in the world and reading what people are saying online, if it ever came to a full-scale conflict in the United States, there would be no problem with any invading force, whether it be Russia, China, etc., our own government, NATO, United Nations. We would be too busy at each other's throats. And they already are in a full-scale war. It's just not physical in the United States. Like actually physical. But I wanted to bring this article to you guys, and I'm going to start doing these videos in article by article, because some of the long videos, I might do one here and there, but a lot of people don't really like, you won't get it all in one sitting, unless you watch it over and over again. I don't expect anyone to sit there and watch hour-long videos over and over again. So, but before we get started, I also want to say this. My opinion on what's going on with Russia, and I'm sure a lot of you guys agree, they are doing this in the middle of all of this, the situation we've been in for the past 2 years, all the mandates, the side effects or actual effects from the certain thing that people weren't supposed to do, which they did, all the deaths that are happening because of that they're trying to cover up. It serves multiple purposes, it always does, but I think that they are going to use this, and once they stop with their, plan and their little thing they got going on over there, they're going to say, look, guys, we stopped Russia. We all came together. And it's classic Hegelian dialectic problem, reaction, solution. They're going to say, we came together as a world, and we stopped this tyrant from launching his army into a sovereign, freedom-loving nation, which is what they basically are saying right now on television. And they're going to say, look, if we can stop this country from doing this, this is why we need a one-world government. Because then countries won't attack each other, because they can't, because we will all be living under a one-world centralized government. There will be no countries to attack. That's one of the angles they're going to use for this entire thing, among other things. But they still have to convince. They have their new world order. It's set up all around us. They have it right now. We are living in it. But they still have to reveal it openly to the public of the world. They still have to put it into the people's minds and get acceptance from it, because if not, then there will always be resistance. And if there's always resistance, then they constantly have to worry about when they might be taken from power. That's why they have to do it this way. That's why they have to go with their insanely expensive and long, drawn-out psychological operations, the cognitive warfare, the psychological warfare, the just all of it. But anyway, let's go ahead and get reading this. Welcome to the new world order. The Western nations, and especially the United States, awoke today to a new world today. So already in the first sentence. After decades of hearing U.S. politicians boastingly describe the U.S. as the exceptional nation, justifying its repeated violation of international law with the invasions of Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Panama, Grenada, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, El Salvador, and regime change interventions in a host of other countries, because it could, all the while telling the rest of the nations of the world that they had to strictly to obey the rules-based orders of international relations, that countries do not invade or violate the borders of other countries. Suddenly, there is another nation that has decided it is exceptional. And yes, this is what Western media does. This is what they do. They have to have a boogeyman, but they also have to play it on multiple different levels. They know people are going to bring this stuff up. They know it. But instead of being like, oh, wait, hey, yeah, we should, not go so hard on Russia, or they'll say, oh, we should go even harder on the United States, because, as we know, the United States is the only nation in the world that has ever truly had real human freedom. Real freedom. Nobody controlled anybody for a while until, we lost that. But we went over the secret destiny of the United States on this channel a while ago, but I can get back into that if anyone's interested. And basically it is, if man could keep his freedom, given all the tools, then that would be the New World Order. And if not, then they would use the materials and goods and services and the creations of a free people to bring about a one world government or a new world order under a one world totalitarian government. Obviously, we went the route of the latter. Anyway, Vladimir Putin's Russia has simply flaunted international law and launched an all-out war on Ukraine, a nation the largest in Europe geographically, bordering it in Eastern Europe. We need not go into justifications Putin has offered. They are as invalid as the ones given by the U.S. for its invasion of Iraq and for its 2-decade-long war of Afghanistan, for its invasion and decade-long war in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, or for its mining in the harbor of Nicaragua, and the funding and arming of a Contra army to create mayhem in that county, I think it's meant to say country, from sanctuaries in neighboring Honduras, and on and on. Yeah, we all know the U.S. has been committing war crimes for a very long time. And all of a sudden, people are crying crocodile tears, and they're so worried about what's going on in Ukraine right now. But this is there's a bigger thing at stake here. There's a bigger play involved. It's not as simple as one country invading another. No, this is to sell the idea of the New World Order system to the minds of the people. The mind is the ultimate battlefield. That's why they have launched their cognitive warfare programs that we read not long ago on this channel as well. We have lived in a world for decades where U.S. has had free rein to ignore international law, the World Court, and the UN Charter, because it has had military power that no nation could contest. Raw, ugly power was always the real justification for American exceptionalism. That is a half-truth. Anyone that spent any length of time here, we went over the United Nations Charter, and we went over the Declaration of Human Rights from the United Nations that had nothing to do with rights or freedom and had everything to do with setting up this one world totalitarian system that people still think is not real, despite there being many quotes, documents, people just openly talking about it now like they always do, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, just everything we know. The United States was, and still sort of is, continued to be the world's police force until a certain point in time, to where they could hand the world on a silver platter to the United Nations once all the hard work and consolidation of countries and the minds of countries and all of that, once it's all done. That's why you see people from all these different countries, a lot of them are leaving on their own, of course. There's always going to be refugees, that's what happens, and my heart goes out to those people. But these people are being incentivized to move into certain countries and to all that because they want to get rid of countries' nationality. And that's the point. So yeah, that was a half-truth. Now we are seeing Russia. Its military over the last 30 years since the dissolution of the Soviet Union restored to a point where, if not as imposing as far-reaching as the US, it's clearly the most powerful force in Europe, has shown that it will do what it wants in its own neighborhood, international law be damned. Okay, the Soviet Union was never, ever, ever dissolved. Not even a little bit. And Mikhail Gorbachev, he said that the internal workings of the Soviet Union will not be changed. It will be changed for outward appearances only. And that's the one where he said not to be concerned with the coming decades of talk of perestroika or democracy. That is for outward purposes. And the real Soviet Union will not change in its internal operations, and their purpose is to disarm the Americans and to let them fall asleep. Okay, moving on. And aside from the impotent imposing of economic sanctions on Russia and on its leaders and oligarch supporters, the U.S. has admitted there is nothing it or its NATO puppet states can do. They want this to happen. We all know that. So, and I'm telling you, it's going to be so they can try to further make their argument in the minds of the people for world government. This will go to a world court. This will go to the United Nations, and they will say that this is perfect. Because no country will ever be able to invade another again. Because we're going to have a world government. Then we will never be able, no one will ever be able to do that. No country can get too powerful. Because there are none. And what's crazy is it's not that hard to figure any of this out. It's common sense. It's your thoughts. They lead you to this conclusion. You just follow your thoughts to the conclusion. That's it with this stuff. And it's so in your face. It's so plain as day for anybody to see. You literally have to be willingly burying your head in the sand to not see it. And that's where we are today. And I actually commented on something on social media recently, and because all I saw was people fighting over this party. Oh, they're Democrat. Oh, you're Republican. Oh, Trump. Oh, Biden. This and that. And I told them I can actually bring that up for you guys, and I will show you. And I said, both parties are fighting, but they don't understand that they are two wings of the same bird, owned and controlled by the same people who own and control the rest of the world's governments. And I talked about how it was Hegelian dialectic. It's a sad day in the United States when the people here do not see through it, despite knowing about this stuff. They teach it in our history books, but they say that other countries do it and our government would never do it. That type of thing. Anyway. And nobody responded to it. Nobody even reacted to it because they know I was right. And I said that their arguments, the left and the right, they change. And they're basically the same, but they swap, is what I meant to say. They swap depending on which party is currently in power. They have the exact same arguments on both sides. They have the exact same defense points on both sides. It just depends on who's in power, and then the other side flips to what the other side was saying, and now this side is saying what the other side was saying the previous administration, and that is by design. Okay, of course the U.S. and its NATO allies could go to war against Russia, but nobody wants to do that. Firstly, it would mean massive destruction in any European states involved in such fighting. But secondly, everyone recognizes that such a war would very quickly go nuclear, either right away or very soon afterwards, once one army, either Russian one or U.S. one, begin to lose. And once nuclear weapons, even small tactical ones, on battlefields get used, the big ones, city destroyer, nation destroyer, thermonuclear bombs won't be far behind. That's another thing. Not the nuclear bomb aspect. They're already saying that Russia is going to cyber attack us. That they're going to hit the power grid. Just like under Trump, they said China is going to hit the power grid, and China owns the Democrats. But now the Democrats are saying that Russia owns the Republicans. It's, like I said a minute ago, the same argument. They just swap based on who's in power. They're also going to use this to jack up the price of food. I had another article here. I won't be able to get to it today. But it said because of the whole situation in Russia, food prices are going to skyrocket. This is part of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. That's what's actually going on. I hope nobody forgot about that. And if you did, you need to go read that book again, and you need to see that's exactly what's going on. It's a good sign that the world, including the US and Russia, seem to recognize this, as evidenced by a notable absence of panic about nuclear war in either country or in the nations of Europe, where such a world-ending war would likely start. Amazon is not experiencing a rush of orders for fallout shelters, and thankfully has no such product on offer on its website. Even with the Russian military quickly rolling over all of Ukraine, President Biden, whose administration stirred up this crisis by refusing to recognize Russia's legitimate concern about an aggressive eastward spread of new anti-Russian NATO member nations right up to Russia's borders, continuing to insist on Ukraine's supposed God-given right to decide to apply for NATO membership, has shown the good sense of the reiterating, even confronted with an all-out Russian invasion of Ukraine, that US and NATO forces would not move to defend Ukraine militarily. With this recognition, Russia has been effectively recognized, likely like the US, as an exceptional nation, one that can act illegally in its own interest, at least within a sphere in which its military is dominant. Again, if you go back to the United Nations, what the United States did, yeah, it's illegal. It's most definitely illegal when it comes to our actual law and actual international law, but the main creditor of the United Nations is the United States, and they're the world's police force. Therefore, they don't have to follow those laws. Those laws are for the nations that need to be put in their place by the United States military-industrial complex. And again, if I was making all of this up, I literally could write a novel, because this is a hell of a thing to make up. China is surely looking at this new world order, there's the word again, intently. It too has a very powerful military, probably at this point far more powerful than Russia, and rivaling the US's once unassailable military, especially within its own local region. Should Taiwan be worried? I would say yes, indeed. The reality is that Putin's invasion of Ukraine almost certainly was discussed and approved in advance by China's paramount leader, Xi Jinping. It is Russia's recent treaty with China, almost mutual assistance pact, and China's strong economic links to Russia that make it possible for Putin and Russia to ignore US-led sanctions. If Russia cannot sell its natural gas and oil to its main market, Europe, because of the US sanctions, China will happily buy it, assuring it long-term, cheap access to those critical fuel supplies. Here's another question for you. Why is it that the US and only NATO members can place sanctions on countries? Why can't the United States be sanctioned by Russia or China or any other country? It doesn't usually happen. Ask yourself why, and the first answer that comes to your head is probably the correct one. And if they could place sanctions, I've never seen it, and or it's not effective. They're not going to let that happen. They need United States. They need us, not us, the people, but they need our government. They need our military. It cannot happen without U.S. participation. That's what Henry Kissinger said. Again. Meanwhile, with Russia now having demonstrated that that might makes right, as the U.S. has long known, making it the basis of its own foreign policy. China may also decide that the time is right to join as a third exceptional nation. As with Russia in the case of Ukraine, the leadership in Beijing is confident that whatever agreements it has with Taiwan, the U.S. will not go to war with China, should Beijing order the People's Liberation Army to take over what Beijing has long considered a renegade province of China. My guess would be that this would be done in stages, first with the capture of the two small offshore islands in the coast of Fujian, Quemoy and Matsu. That would be followed by a PLA, People's Liberation Army, takeover of the Penghu, an island situated midway across the Taiwan Strait between Fujian and Taiwan. At that point, Taiwan would have a choice, some kind of negotiation giving it some local autonomy, while conceding its status as part of China, or an invasion. Taiwan cannot expect to be saved by U.S. military intervention, and trying to fight China's military, whether on its own or with U.S. support, would be a pointless and ruinous failure. It is today a new world with a new world order. This time, instead of a sole superpower, we have entered a multipolar world in which military and economic might will determine what actions a powerful country can get away with. Instead of one country having all that power, there are now 3 countries that have it. and at least for now, clumsy foreign policy actions on the part of a string of hubristic and short-sighted U.S. presidential administrations of both political parties, beginning with the Clinton or even Carter administration, have assured that the two of those countries, Russia and China, are close partners. It may be too late, but one can hope that faced with this likely unstable stalemate, the U.S. will eventually concede that it's no longer exceptional and will support a world order operating according to universally accepted standards defined by the United Nations and adjudicated through the World Court. Now think about that. That would be a pipe dream at this point, but the alternative is not pretty. As a tripolar world of enemy or rival states, the US, Russia, and China assert their power where they can, bumping up against each other at some point and creating havoc and bloodshed in those unfortunate countries that happen to be in the middle of these rivalries. This is incredible. It's incredible to watch the world go down this path. We are 2 years into this reset, and they started it with Event 201 and rolled it out March 13th of 2020. We are literally 10 days away from March 13th of 2022. So almost a 2-year mark before former President Trump declared a national emergency against the situation. They're going forward with this, and they are so deep in now, it is almost impossible to turn it around. And we have people fighting over which party they want to rule their lives, justifying power grabs by either party, depending on, of course, who's in power. Under Trump, the Trump supporters, they wanted the military on the streets to deal with the rioters and whatnot. Under Joe Biden, the Democrat supporters want military crackdown of Trump supporters, etc. And, conspiracy theorists or anybody that goes against the woke agenda or whatever else. I always said, and a lot of people have also said this too, when they go in and finally dismantle this two-party system like it was meant to in the beginning, they will take power with the left side at the expense of the right. And I say that because even though both sides now exist on the left side of the actual spectrum, the actual political spectrum, which is all the way on the right side, is complete absence of any control. All the way on the left side is complete control over everything, because you have to have two extremes. The left and the right side of today both exist on the left side of that spectrum because both want more government power. It just so happens that the left side wants a little bit more control, of course, because they're far left. And it will be at the expense of the right, which is why we saw the QAnon thing, which is why we saw the whole Jan 6th, which is why we saw the whole demonization of anybody in the United States or elsewhere who is critical of the government. They lump you in with that, with Trump supporters and terrorists and all that. And that's just where we happen to be today. So, in closing, I would like to say, anyone that has any information, you can email me, Austin J. Star with 2 R's, 0127 at gmail.com. Send me whatever you have. I will look at it. If you have contact information for me, like I said in the beginning, I'm appreciative of all of you guys. And I really, really want to sit down soon and do a live stream. I haven't had time to do it recently, but I really want to sit down and do it because I miss those things. I miss walking around talking to you guys. I mean, it was the highlight of my day. So the next day that it's actually nice here, I can go walk around. I will be doing that, and we can just go back and forth and talk about the situation, talk about God, talk about how the people better come to realization quick that this is going on and see through all these Hegelian dialectic tactics. And maybe we just might have a chance at preserving freedom. God bless every single one of you. Good night.